Hello, my name is Virgil, and this is Literally Books. Today, I want to talk about Fredrick Pohl's Gateway. Pohl was an editor for a magazine. I don't remember which one. I know that, for example, when I talked about Philip Jose Farmer's Riverworld series, the 2 Year Scattered Bodies Go, the first book, I mentioned that Pohl encouraged Farmer to write that series. That kind of makes him to, I think he encouraged him to publish it as in periodicals, and then later those periodicals were collected into the first Riverworld book. So I do know that about him, and I know, but I never actually read that I'm aware of any of Pohl's writing in a Reddit post that I did for that Farmer video. Two separate people mentioned that I should look at Pohl's Gateway. Recommendations came pretty strong, like, oh, you should really check it out. It's a really great book. And there was a kind of back and forth conversation. I said, okay, I will. I'll read it. I probably won't get it read to the end of the month. That end of the month that I was referencing at the time would have been the end of July. It's September. So I did read it. Actually, I did read it at the end of that month, and I really liked it, and I want to talk about it. But I first want to say thank you to the people who recommended it to me, because, sometimes even somebody who likes classic science fiction, it's kind of hard to sort of sift through that stuff to sort of find something that you're going to like. I'm really happy that I read that this year. It was a really great book. So I want to talk about it, but I first just want to say thank you to those people who recommended it to me. I really appreciate it. And one of them also recommended I try Peter Hamilton, which I am interested in trying, and I am going to do. So thank you to those people on Reddit. Really appreciate it. Really like this book. So let's talk a little bit about Gateway. The book follows Robbie, and Robbie, it's told through two different narratives, so to speak. One is Robbie going to like a psychiatrist that's a computer, and sort of like talking about his woes, and usually getting very angry about it, and he's sort of like recounting things that have happened to him, and it's sort of like the computer is sort of psychoanalyzing him, and sort of like trying to push him to sort of have a breakthrough, to kind of deal with these things that have happened in the past, to sort of deal with the stress and anxiety and depression that he's coping with from events that happened much earlier in his life. And this Robbie, who's going to this computer to be analyzed, to work through his issues, is very wealthy. He'll flash back to young Robbie, and young Robbie essentially was born in like a mining town or something on Earth in the far future, and he's able to kind of like get lucky enough to be able to go to Gateway. It's an alien artifact from an alien civilization that's long disappeared, called the Heechee. There's like no evidence of what happened to the Heechee. And they don't even understand how the Heechee technology works, but they have this ability to take these Heechee ships that can travel extremely fast to different parts of the galaxy. Actually, I may even say universe. The problem is that they don't really know how to control the spaceships, and they don't really know where they're going to end up, and they don't know that they're going to make it back. In fact, the lethality is pretty high, but the potential for coming back with some sort of discovery is also there, and so it's kind of like this big lottery that you could maybe win that could set you up for the rest of your life. So a lot of people who are sort of like are sort of gambling with their lives to sort of try this, because there's no guarantee that anything you do is going to be. You might come back and have like not really any success. You might not come back. You might come back and be horribly with some sort of disease or sickness or injury, that's not even related to necessarily like wildlife or anything like that. I'll talk about that in a second. But, a lot of times the injuries are related to, or the deaths are related to, like traveling stuff, like getting caught and trying to come back and the trip out, because they don't really have any way with these alien ships, these Heechee ships, to know how long a one-way trip even is. So they take enough supplies, but there's a point where they're like, if we go much longer, we're not going to make it back unless there's food there somehow. And the chances of that, because this is a kind of a hard science fiction world, are extremely low. Of the chances of wherever we go of there being some sort of biocompatible material there for us to eat is low. So there's always this sort of panic around the halfway, where the halfway into the supplies, or actually a little shy of that, because you need time to make a discovery, right, to bring back to get this wealth. It could be alien technology from the Hichi, or it could just any sort of thing, any sort of discovery that's valuable, that could mean something to humanity, is worth a lot. And there are no aliens in this story. In fact, you never see a Hichi. I don't even think that they know what the Hichi look like. Maybe they surmise what the Hichi look like, but they're not really certain. They don't really know anything about Hichi culture. Just sort of like live in this base that was theirs, and they use these ships that were theirs. And that's all they really know. That's everything they know about the Hichi is just based on that. You can imagine if like you were to climb into like a aircraft and be expected to fly it, knowing nothing about what the controls are, not even be able to read what the individual controls say they do, what that would look like, how successful you would be. And we're especially talking here, the ships kind of are on autopilot. So they really just they figured out how to like set them up and launch them, and they know how to get them back. But any sort of change or alteration, could mean death, because it could mean your ship deviates and now it won't go back to Gateway when on the return trip. It could be that you, like I said, you go too far out. You go the trip there across the galaxy, across galaxies, could be so long that maybe you never even reach your destination with enough food. You just die before that even happens. And they don't know, based on lights and symbols and everything, what any of these, how to gauge if it's a safe trip or not. All these like people, like with Robbie, that go to Gateway are sort of like, kind of gambling with their lives. They're not really sure. There's an air of desperation, or sort of depression, right? Sort of like not really valuing themselves, because somebody who has something meaningful going on in their life, who isn't struggling, wouldn't do this. I mean, would any of us go and do something like this, not having really no control or knowledge about what would happen to us if we went? It's like, maybe you'll win, maybe, we want to play this lottery, maybe you'll win and you'll retire, or maybe you'll die horribly, or, maybe who knows what happens to you. Maybe you get caught somewhere. But, again, a hard science fiction world. So the idea of you going out and just being stuck somewhere but being okay is basically nil, because it's the chances of the environment that you would go to an alien planet that happens to have an environment that you and I, the human beings, would be compatible with, is extremely slim. But obviously these Hichi destinations that they go to have something of significance there. They just don't really know what. They don't know, based on the console that the pilots set up before they leave. They don't really know what this data is trying to tell them. So they don't really know if it's going to be like really close to a star or something else. They just don't know. Or it could be like just like a dead planet. And also, that's another thing to remember, is that the Hichi are gone, and long gone so long that astrological events have happened. Or maybe, we have to remember too that even our planet is not just orbiting our star, but our star is orbiting in the Milky Way. So, it takes you to a coordinate, but maybe there's nothing there anymore. Maybe that has moved away. I don't know if they even know for sure if the ship's trajectory has changed based on the current cosmology. So just that's kind of like a layout of the sort of like the stuff that's going on, kind of like the groundwork for what they're dealing with here. Robbie, who goes to Gateway and is really just paranoid and scared and doesn't want to go on a mission. He flies to Gateway on a ship with a woman. He kind of gets in a relationship with her, and when she's like, okay, we're going to go on a ship, like real soon, he's like, well, I don't know, I'll just wait. And so she leaves and he stays behind, and then he finds another woman. Clara is the character's name, and Robbie and Clara do go on a mission, and I won't talk about what actually happens, because that's part of the reveal of the book. You're kind of like, that Robbie, when the book starts, he starts talking, that he's going to this computer who's analyzing him. He's trying to help him work through his issues. He's going for a reason, but you don't really know what the reason is. And I guess I'll have to do a little bit of a spoil at the end of this, because I do kind of want to talk about it a little bit, because it's kind of important to the book, and it I got some thoughts about it. I guess I just want to talk about it. Something to know is that this book is similar to, say, something like Starship Troopers, or something, I'm trying to think of another book, like a Heinlein, some of the Heinlein books. There's a lot of talk about things happening, but like actual action is pretty low. There's like crazy stuff going on and blasters, and like, there's none of that. There's none of that at all. It's very much about the human element. The setup, I guess, for this story is very much like a pulp sci-fi idea and setup, but it's presented in a very realistic way. Like, what would people really be like? It wouldn't be this like grand adventure and people are just going out and dying and who cares, It's like, no, the people are doing this stuff, and the people who do it are kind of desperate, and they're only doing it because they just couldn't make it for some reason or other in the normal world. So they're here because for some reason they either emotionally they're depleted, or maybe they're traumatized in some way, and this is like some sort of a way to work through their emotions, sort of like they don't value themselves. Things like that, right? That's the kind of stuff that's the kind of person, I guess, or the kind of emotional state or state somebody would have to be in to want to do these sorts of things, to want to gamble with themselves, right? And that, I like that that's explored, but it's not explored in a ugly way. It's explored in a very human way. And Robbie, the main character, is very human. He is not an idealized hero. In fact, there's probably a thing or two that happens in the book, one thing specifically, that makes you very much not like Robbie. You have a difficult time sympathizing with him because of some of the things that he does. I really like this book. I think it does a really excellent job of like I said, putting real people in a sort of pulp science fiction sort of story idea and just sort of seeing what happens. You should not come in with this with the expectation that this is going to be some sort of like, spaceships flying across the earth and, and all this kind of crazy stuff and like very adventurous. And it's not that way at all. It's very much in line with a hard science fiction story, much more about the psychological side of what Robbie is sort of going through and like why he's here in the first place, and the stress that he's dealing with, what it means to a person to go through these things. I really like that approach. I really did like it. That's one of the things I think that makes this book very endearing. It's difficult in a sense to recommend because someone who wants to read science fiction normally isn't looking for that kind of a story. They're looking for Star Wars or even maybe Star Trek, right? And this is neither of those things. I don't really know. It's more like 2001 or something like that, right? It's very much not about the science. There is some science in there, and there's some interesting things in there, and it's a very good read, very easy read. Easy in the sense that it pulls you through it, but it is not a adventure, and I think that's where it's not that the marketing is trying to say that, but that's just maybe a misconception that someone could have, and I think that maybe some of the people that don't like this book don't know what kind of story it's going to be. You could almost say that this story is just fiction. It would be very easy to translate Gateway into like the West or something like that. The unexplored, the American West. It kind of, in a sense, I could almost say that it reminds me, not exactly, but you could say it has similar elements to Larry McMurtry's Berrybender Chronicles. These regular people exploring a sort of exotic setting, but it's not exactly as romantic and romanticized as you might traditionally think. But there's still that sort of beauty of the genre, right? In science fiction, there's still sort of that vastness and that strangeness that you want in space is still there. It's just not pulpish at all. So a little bit of spoiler here. I don't know. I'm not going to timestamp this, but I am going to spoil it a little bit. I don't know. If you don't want to be spoiled, then I guess just stop, because I don't really want to put a timestamp, because I'll probably forget to put the timestamp and it'll just be a thing. But I'm going to spoil the book a little bit because and so here I go. Robbie goes out a couple times. Right? He goes out once with Clara, which is unsuccessful. Another time by himself, that time is also unsuccessful, but he's able to do something that sort of like gets him in trouble and also sort of like makes him of interest, makes his unique thing that he was able to do of interest to the organization, the organization that runs Gateway. And so they go on a third mission, a weird mission where they send two ships out together. They want to test an idea. That mission does not end well. Robbie comes back, but the rest of the crew of the other two ships do not make it because of the situation that happens. So we discover that all this therapy that Robbie's been going through is to deal with the survivor's guilt that he has around being the only one that made it back and sort of like making a fortune on it. You know, because he sort of like gets a payout. Even though Robbie is not an idealized character, and even though maybe probably by this point you're not crazy about him anymore. Like you might have been cool with Robbie at first, you know, you might have kind of got swayed to Robbie's side in the very beginning of the novel, and as the novel wears on, you kind of become more and more kind of ambivalent about him maybe. You still don't want to see something bad happen to him, and he's trying to make amends for the mistakes that he has made. This thing happens and he gets home, and you can see why he's dealing with his survivor's guilt, and you can feel it, and you are kind of tortured in that same sense, and you can feel that Robbie like doesn't want to live anymore. He doesn't like himself. He doesn't like, you know, he's sort of even acting out even in his daily life now as, you know, he has all this reward and he's retired and he has all this money. You can still see that he's still sort of acting out. He's still angry. He's angry, but the person he's angry at is really himself. At the very end of this, there's this sort of kind of really kind of beautiful moment where this computer, like kind of analyzing and kind of helping him work through it, sort of tells him that, like, you know, it's okay. And he kind of finally kind of gets it. I thought that was kind of a cool moment. I thought it was really great. It was not something I expected to get out of this novel at the end. I didn't think that we were going to get such a meaningful conclusion to the novel. Really made it for like a really nice payoff. I do think that there are sequels to this book. I think that there are. I'm not 100% certain that I'm interested in them, only because that sort of any continuation of this story sort of takes away from what that first story did for me. I don't know that I'm going to read the next story. I certainly am not going to read it right away. I may even want to read Gateway again before I would try something like that. But I really enjoyed the book, and I was kind of surprised. I was surprised at the direction it took. Very pleased with what I feel is a very genuine and sort of real reaction that Robbie has to his experience and his difficulty in working through what he's going through, you know. So I really appreciate that. This is kind of a downturn in the video. Sorry. I can see why this is a Hugo winning novel. Did it win a Nebula? It did win the Nebula. Well, that's interesting that they didn't bother to put that in there. It was adapted to a computer game in '92. I don't think that, but it's a winner of the Hugo for Best Novel, Locust for Best Novel, Nebula for Best Novel, and the John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel. I think it deserves all those. I think it's kind of timeless in that sense, you know. And it's another thing I like is that it's the kind of science fiction book that isn't going to date itself because it doesn't focus on the individual unique technology in that particular instance. So for that, I think it's really worth it. Okay, so do yourself a favor and go read Gateway. Thank you very much to the people who recommended it to me. I really loved it. All right, so in the mail today, I got a book, and I'm kind of excited about it. I will probably definitely talk about it at some point, but it's Hugo Pratt's The Ballad of the Salt Seas. And this is a graphic novel series that I'm really excited to read and talk about. And I've finally found a good deal on this collection. It was, I think, originally in Italian or maybe French. I want to say Italian. And it's just, originally it was that way, and then it was translated. And it's kind of hard to find translations, or they're priced very dearly. I was kind of fortunate that this one is actually colored. I think originally they were black and white. Really love Hugo Pratt's illustration style. I've always heard very good things about his storytelling, sort of regarded as maybe one of the first examples of sort of a literary comics, so to speak, or comics that sort of take themselves a little more seriously and trying to deal with a little bit more serious things. Now, I don't remember if they actually said that it was a library version. I don't know if you can see the library stamps on the side. But as I've said before, I don't mind that at all. It doesn't really detract it from me at all. I just kind of wish I'd known that, or it could be that I didn't look close enough. And if so, well, that is on me. So I do plan on reading this and then talking about it. I like Hugo Pratt's art style a lot, and I've heard very good things about his storytelling, so excited about that. Got the swab back. Pretty interesting. It's by Brian Evanson. It's the Glassy Burning Floor of Hell. Okay. Interested in reading this book. I'll read you the back if you're interested in hearing about it. A sentient, murderous prosthetic leg, shadowy creatures lurking behind a shimmering wall, brutal barrowmen, all the terrors that populate the glassy floor of burning hell. Perhaps the most alarming are the beings who decimated the habitable earth, humans. Brian Evanson's combines psychological and ecological horror in this new collection of tales, each thrumming with his award-winning literary craftsmanship, dark humor, and thrilling suspense. The general reviews for this were generally positive. I mean, there's always somebody who's like, oh, that wasn't what I thought. Okay, but it sounded pretty interesting to me. I love the idea of a sentient murderous prosthetic leg. Obviously, they put that one first because they know it's kind of gets you to keep reading, but this seems like it'd be pretty cool. Maybe I'll try and read this and have it ready for October. Damn it, that means I have to read it really soon. Why did I say that? That's really it. Hopefully you enjoy my coverage of Fredrick Pohl's Gateway. I really recommend it. If you've enjoyed this sort of maybe more low-key science fiction, I think it's good. If you like stories that explore the human side and human emotion and human interaction, right, in a science fiction setting, just gorgeous. I mean, it really is. It won those awards not just because people like Fredrick Pohl. It won them because that book did something that I don't think we see very often in genre fiction. And I absolutely love it when genre fiction sort of rises above itself and rises above genre fiction into just fiction. I really, really enjoy that. It's probably my favorite variety of fiction in general, is fiction that sort of is a genre type fiction that sort of comes above that, sort of elevates it. A lot of the writers that I like tend to do that, and that's why I like them. But I also like really pulpy stuff, so I don't know, I guess I swing both ways. I didn't want to say that. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. My name is Virgil. This is Literally Books. Bye.